So this section is on judgment and personalities and feeling release. So a little more of the same, a little bit deeper. So when we think and make judgments, or how we think and make judgments, there are I got a PhD, or I got an undergraduate degree in psychology, and it was in the years of behaviorism, where Skinner was very popular, and we're talking about, putting children in boxes so they learn with levers so they could become conditioned and all of that sort of thing. And all I cared about was stimulus response. And how did you have to stimulate someone to get a certain kind of response? And I go, I don't want to know that. I want to know how we work. So I wasn't getting that as an undergraduate. So I went on and I said, well, I'm going to get a PhD in biological psychology, study the brain, so I know how it works. But in those days, it was the same model. You cut out this part of the brain, you get this response. If you stimulate this part of the brain, you get this response. And they didn't know anything. And you get some whole conference on what happens when you stimulate the ventral medial nucleus of the hypothalamus or something like that. And I'm going, this is all crazy. And it wasn't until I got into neurolinguistic programming that they start teaching me, how do you think? And it's really simple. When I tell you this, you go, oh, I've known this all along. You've got 5 primary modalities of thinking. You see things, you hear things, you feel things, you taste things, you smell things. And you think in terms of those same modalities. And within each of those modalities, there are submodalities or fine detail. And Michael Hall says the biggest mistake NLP ever did was name them submodalities, or the details, because they're really meta, they're above it. They determine the whole characteristics of it. But submodalities operate largely below the level of consciousness because they're basically part of the operating system through which everything works. And it's through our submodalities that we make judgments. One example, I had cataract surgery recently. And I was going to India, so there was a separation of about 2 months between one and the other. And I had one in which I almost couldn't see out of my eye, so they did that one first. And then I noticed, so suddenly I had crisp 20/20 vision in that eye, and I noticed if I looked out of that eye, everything was like crystal clear. And if I looked out of the other eye, so I covered the other eye up, everything had an orangey tinge, which I guess was the cataract. But I also noticed a distinct preference of clear for orangey. Orangey might have made sunsets look a little better or something, but for some reason, I was wired so that clear was better than orangey. But my dominant eye was the orangey one. And I didn't know the difference till I had 2 different eyes with 2 different things. But it was a good example of submodality because an orangey tinge to everything made it less, or at least produced a judgment in me of less desirable. So if you look at visual submodalities, you have things like this. Associated, dissociated. Associated means in the picture, you're in the picture. You're in your body doing it. So it's like you see a picture, but you see things out of your own eyes, and you get all the feelings and everything associated with. Whereas dissociated, you see yourself. Brightness. How bright is it? What's the angle of view? How big is the picture? Is it framed or panoramic? Is it in color or black and white in the color intensity? Is it a movie or a still? Is it, how big is the central object? How much movement is there? How far away is the central object? What's the focus? What's the 3D quality? Things like this are all what we call the visual submodalities, but they're the drivers of everything. They're how we make judgments. Auditory has things like volume, tempo, timbre, nature of the voice, like a Mickey Mouse voice versus Donald Duck voice versus your wife's tone or your husband's tone. Rhythm, pauses, uniqueness of the sound, the intensity, inflections, tonality, speed. So if I talk really fast like this, what's your reaction to it? If you're visual and you really like visual stuff, then you really like that. But I'm kinesthetic, so I like much slower. That almost kind of made my whole sense of being jangle. But Tony Robbins talks that fast. Kinesthetic, hot versus cold, texture, vibration, pressure, movement, duration, steady versus intermittent, intensity, weight, density, tingling, muscular tension, size of feeling, location of feeling. So I'm going to test some submodalities. So think of a situation in what does everybody have a partner? Sammy, why don't you be with Kurt? So think of a situation. So you have the notes that I just went over on the different types of submodalities. So think of a situation in which you failed. And then what did you see? Check out the visual submodalities, the auditory submodalities, the kinesthetic submodalities. And after you elicit each, so you go, is it in color or black and white? So if it's in color, have them make it black and white. See what the impact is. What's the contrast? Is it 1 to 10? If it's a real low contrast, make the contrast much sharper. Or if it's really sharp, make it dull, or make it much less. What's the brightness on a scale of 1 to 10? If it's really dim, make it brighter. So you're going to see the impact of each of these submodalities. So all you're going to do is take a situation in which you failed, get an image or get how you represent that. I mean, it could be you're just going, oh, I failed, and it's your own voice at a certain tone. But you could have a picture, all sorts of things with it. See what it is, and see what the key submodalities are, or metamodalities, as Michael Hall would call them, that drive it. So then what we're going to do is find out what submodality for you is critical for failure. So who would like to comment on what you learned from that?
Well, one comment, I guess, with the question attached is that I noticed that my failures I tend to see as sort of still color images, somewhat close up. And when I thought about sort of successes, it was more kinesthetic. It was dominated by sort of a certain feeling. Although for my successes, I'm looking straighter up, and for my failures, I'm looking down.
So looking up in small pictures, they're movies or stills? Stills?
For my successes or the failures? The failures are still images, color kind of close up.
Failures are still images, color close up. And the failure in the other one?
And the successes dominated by kinesthetic feeling.
Are they pictures though?
There are some pictures. They tend to be more moving pictures and a little more distant.
So moving pictures that dominate you kinesthetically. Now I'm just curious because my guess is most people are wired differently. Is somebody totally different than that? You've got a result? Or you're all the same?
Mine was more just a lot of noise internally, just unidentifiable noise when I recognized that I failed.
So failure is a lot of noise inside,
Yeah,
like white noise or
it's like chatter.
neuron voice.
No, just unidentifiable chatter, not a real message there, but just like, it's like, why did I do that? Because I picked a mistake that I made in trading that I just felt like I would have never made that mistake. Just too careful. And I made it big time. And when I realized it was just like, that's it.
So we have another example. Failure is a lot of noise. So what you're going to find is you all do this probably differently. But it's interesting just to see how you wire and have wired failure inside of yourself. So there is an opposite exercise, but I want to do it right now, which is to do successes. Jose did it anyway because it was in the slide notes, and you can if you've got it at home, they'll be part of your notes, so you can do successes as well and compare them. But I want to move on, which is to look at your personalities and how they're formed. So Oneness University says you are a crowd inside. Transactional analysis, for example, is one form of therapy that says you consist of thousands of parts. Libby Adams in Peak 202 in her 28-day course says you are a big I, your inner guidance, surrounded by lots of parts masquerading as you that she calls little I. So those are examples. Here's an example of your personalities or you being a crowd inside. We'll say John and Mary are both decide to have a romantic evening together. And for Mary, that's Mary 57, and John part 32 agrees that they'll have a romantic dinner together. Then John gets an emergency call, which brings out John 87. Now John 87 isn't interested in romantic dinners. He's sort of panicky. And because John 87 comes out, that means Mary 32 comes out. And her job is to defend against John 87. But now John 87 knows about Mary 32, so that brings out John 133. He had to go up 133 parts to get one to figure out how to deal with Mary 32. And then, but Mary 32, Mary knows about John 133 now, so that brings out Mary 3, which is very primitive. And neither Mary 3 nor John 133 are interested in being romantic. You know how this works? Yeah, you probably have an experience with it. Different parts of you come out. That's an example of your personalities. If you really want to get into your personalities, listen to your own conversation, and every time you say the word I, ask which part of you is speaking. And said that. So, how do parts form? Whenever you form a judgment about something, and you resist the negative aspect of that judgment, so every judgment has a positive and negative, you resist the negative aspect. By doing so, you make yourself more solid, and you create a new part of your personality. So, the fear part says, I never want to fear again. So now you have a part whose job is not to feel fear, that has access to stored fear, so it can bring it up all the time. And so what you really are, and this is kind of a summary, is a collection of many personalities, all of whom use your name, I. to describe themselves. So you become under the illusion that you are I, but a different personality is talking for each one. So these personalities can represent feelings you don't want to feel. So you've resisted some judgment, and that creates a personality. You might have a fear part, an anger part, a stubborn part. They could be roles you play in life, particularly if the role has a lot of things you resist. They could be other people in your life. So you don't really know anybody, including your spouse. You just have a representation of your spouse that makes it easier to live with them. Because it thinks it knows how they are, so you'd have to deal. So your dealings with your spouse are really your dealings with your personality that represents your spouse. And it could be your mom part, your dad part, your spouse part, or whatever. Each personality, when it's formed, has a positive intention. So even a fear part that brings up fear all the time, its desire is not to feel fear. Each personality type has its own set of beliefs related around why it was formed. And that's why you can be at war with yourself. But to do anything well, you need to function congruently. Everybody has said something like, on the one hand, I feel like I ought to do this, but on the other hand, I'm drawn in this direction. That's just two different parts causing you to be incongruent because they're in conflict with each other. And each one used the word I. On the one hand, I'm drawn to this. On the other hand, I want to do this. And the confusion comes when you think I is the same person. So whenever you hear the word I, ask what personality is talking. What's it trying to do for you? What's its positive intention? In Peak 101, we used to do this exercise where you'd bring up your traitor part, and then the traitor part would ask who you're in conflict with. Well, even a better way to go is to simply watch your thinking, and every time you say the word I, ask what part of you is saying that word. Because it's either your higher self, but if you're not regularly talking to your higher self and you're full of incongruencies, your higher self probably is very much in the background, or some part. So it's a good way to figure out who's in there. When you learn about conflicting parts, you also want to talk to that part and find out its intention for you. Becoming aware of saying the word I, and basically identifying conflicting parts. So you should be able to come up with at least, say, 20 personalities that run your life. The person you call yourself by, your name, is really a collection of these personalities. So begin to know who they are. And you probably won't get rid of all of them, but at least you can go, oh, hi, I'm glad to see you're here. What do you want today? So there's conflict resolution. There's a form of conflict resolution in the Peak Performance course, in the home study course, and it's an exercise that we do in Peak 101. I don't really have time to do it here, but it's really one way to get rid of parts. Another way is what we do in Libby Adams' work in Peak 202. And here, conflict resolution is basically parts are brought to your higher self. And most parts don't know about their higher self or do respect the higher self. And when they take on the aspect of the higher self and the beliefs of the higher self, they can all be drawn into that. So either you get parts to kind of merge and work together through conflict resolution, or you bring parts into your higher self. All of this begins to make you more and more whole and congruent, so you have less internal conflict. So releasing stored feelings is the next part. Is everybody pretty clear about parts? Are there any questions on parts?
Is the goal not to have any parts or not?
Well, I'm not sure you'll ever get rid of all of them, but the less conflict you have within yourself, the more at peace you'll be. So releasing stored feelings. Any thought you attach to in any way, you tend to become it. So each part has its own set of beliefs. For example, Tharp beliefs come from my modeling part, and none of the other Tharp of the other parts have beliefs that conflict in any way with Tharp think beliefs. Non-useful beliefs are easy to change if they don't have charge, but otherwise you need to do feeling release. Mm-hmm.
This is the second time I see the word modeling.
So one of the things that I've always wanted to do is model things. I want to know how people do things. What are the keys to success? One of the presuppositions of NLP is if one person can do it successfully, anyone can do it. You just have to figure out how they do it. So to model someone, you have to find a group of people who do the same thing successfully. And then you ask each one of them, what do you do? So if I were to model 10 traders, I'd say to each one, what do you do? What produces your success? Now, when I did that at first, I got their systems, and all their systems were different. And one of the rules is it's what they do in common. So their system was not what was producing the success. It was more of the nature of the low-risk ideas produced by their systems. So that came up with what I call the tasks of trading. And so there's certain tasks that everybody does in terms of trading. The first one being something like self-analysis, analyzing yourself, getting all your parts to figure out if they're congruent and ready to trade together. But when as you find out what the parts are or what the different tasks are, then you need to know the ingredients for each task, which are beliefs, the mental states, so what kind of state do you have to be in to do that task, and the mental strategies, which is the thinking, the sequencing of thinking to do the task. So that's what modeling means.
So if you want to model a good parent, you would have to really know.
You'd have to find like 10 parents who are really, really good parents, and then you'd ask them, what do you do? And then you'd find out what they tend to do in common. And I'd throw out all the idiosyncrasies. I mean, some idiosyncrasies might be really good, but if all of them aren't doing it, it's what do they have in common that's probably the most useful. So you figure out what they have in common and what is it they do in common, what are the tasks they do, and then what are the beliefs necessary to do each task, what is the thought process, which is what I call mental strategies to do each task, and what is the mental state to do each task.
Sounds like you have to have a PhD to do all that.
No, I don't think you need to. So you could run things through the belief examination paradigm. If the belief is useful, you keep it. If it's not useful, does it have charge? If the answer is no, you could drop the belief or change it. But if it's yes, then you got to release the charge. So that's a simple way to find out about charge. And if you look at So one of the first exercises I have the super traders do is examine like 350 beliefs. And they're looking for non-useful beliefs, and they're especially looking for the charged beliefs and what are some of the common charges, and then they begin to know what's running them. So what do we do with feelings? Well, we do several forms of feeling release, but I took this video that comes from the Sedona method on what we do with feelings. So we're going to watch that.
Yesterday, I'm going to show you what some of these things that we're usually doing with our feelings look like. This chair, poor chair, represents our unwanted emotions. So here's here's a common strategy. Ever done that with a feeling? What feeling? Not me. I feel fine. Here's another one. Oh, and here's another one. Or if it's a bad day, oh, and here's another one that we do. Let's see. Oh, this is a Shelby Williams Industrial Incorporated chair for Morristown, Tennessee. Let me take notes about that. It has a crosshatch pattern on the bottom. I wonder why. And here's another one. Let's see if there's any other ones I want to illustrate. No, I think that's enough. But the problem with all of these is this. And actually, we also do this. I'm going to give you a chair back in a second, but I just want to demonstrate one other thing we're doing all the time. You can keep it. Oh, thanks. Mine's really heavy today. How's yours?
Really heavy. Very heavy.
Now, the one thing is about, with this analogy that I haven't worked out yet, is how to show releasing, because when you let go, you actually really just let it go and it disappears. It goes back into universal substance, and I haven't figured out how to demonstrate that yet with a chair. So the closest I can get is this.
So that's an example of what people do with feelings. And there's numerous feeling release techniques. Hal Dwoskins, that was a video of him, does the Sedona method. And there's lots of videos on the Sedona method that you can get a look at on YouTube. That actually comes from a free DVD that they give out as a demo. So you can, releasing, say, the charge on guilt and anger, you can do the Sedona method. You can do the oneness method, which is what we teach in the oneness course, for those of you who've taken it. You basically go in and have your divine help you with the feeling release. You can do the technique that we teach in Peak Performance 101, which has to do with finding a point in the room and flowing it to that point. You can do the park bench technique, and this is with let's say your life is dominated, somebody died that's very close to you, and your life is dominated by grief, and you can't help it. All day long you're thinking about how you've lost this person or this cat or animal or whatever it is, and you're just dominated by the grief of having lost them. So you make a decision, well, I'm spending at least 16 awake hours thinking about this, so I might as well really think about it. So you make a decision to find a neutral spot like a park bench, and you go sit on the park bench and you devote an hour to really getting into the feelings. You know, you go, I'm really feeling guilt all day or grief all day long. I'm going to feel grief really strongly for the next hour. So you really concentrate on feeling the grief. And you know, maybe after 45 minutes it becomes pretty hard to keep feeling it, depending on how much story you bring into it and everything else. But probably after about 45 minutes you're bored and it's hard to feel grief again. So day 2, your job is now, you go sit on your park bench and you got to feel it for 45 minutes. You know, and maybe after 40 minutes it becomes boring again and seems to be gone. So the next day you go for 40 minutes. At the end of the week it's probably gone. Or you could just sit there and feel it intensely and intensely until it is gone and it's totally popped and gone and you can't ever feel it again. That technique's described in the feeling release chapter of Trading Beyond the Matrix. So there's lots of feeling release methods. So this is the Sedona method of feeling release. So this is basically, because I don't have the time to teach any of the ones we do, and you can go buy this, you can go watch these videos and do this. I'm going to show you some of these.
To do as we go through this together is to allow it to be as simple and as easy as it actually is. So since this is a seminar on success, what I'd like you to do is just think of one of the blocks that you've hit up against more than once as you've pursued your goals that have gotten in your way. And then I'm going to ask you these series of questions. The first one is, could you let it go? And could you just means, are you capable of it? And if you were able to drop that object, and I noticed you were 100% successful in this room, dropping that object, then you can let go of any emotion. The second question is, would you let it go? And would you just means, are you willing to? And if you're sitting there debating and you're not sure, ask yourself, would I rather hold on to this pain or this suffering or this problem, or would I rather be free of it? And the last question is when. And when is simply an invitation to decide to do it now. Now, it's okay, what I recommend is you avoid internal debate as much as possible. And now I say as much as possible, some of you are debaters, so you're going to have a whole conversation with yourself about it, and that's okay. But as best you can, let that fall away as we get into this. And say yes or no to yourself as I ask these questions. Either one is okay. Most of you think if someone asks you a question like this, you have to say yes. So just to get that out of your system, everybody say yes. Yes. Okay, good. Now everybody say no. No. Yes. Yes. No. No. Yes. Yes. No. 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 What's the difference? It's just a sound. And we so often in life pick a sound and then hang our whole life around it, even though it's just a sound. So just say yes or no to these questions and don't worry about the outcome. In my seminars, some of the biggest breakthroughs happen when people just scream. And by the way, you don't have to scream here. That's not part of this process. Do this silently to yourself. I think people would find it distracting if you start screaming. You know, I'll be working with someone and I'll ask, could you let it go? And they'll go, no. And then they'll start letting go anyway. So just allow this to be as easy as it is. So to go back to, focus on that particular block that you may have become aware of in the past few days. that there may still be some residual charge on. Now, I know you've done a lot of work already, so a lot of it has been let go of. But there may be, you may be saving some. You know, maybe you were hoping it was going to rain in Las Vegas, but that doesn't happen too often. And just notice how you feel inside, how your body feels, what thoughts you're having, what pictures you're having, and just welcome it. Let it be here. Just let yourself feel whatever you're feeling. And now I'm going to ask these questions. And now remember, you're just focusing on the feeling, not on the problem. I'll explain how they relate together in a little while. So could you let it go? Just could you? Would you? When? Okay, now just notice how you feel inside. Just welcome that too. Just let it be here. Just let the feeling be here as best you can. And then could you let it go? Just could you? Would you? When? And take one more look at that specific issue and notice how you feel inside. Now you may be already feeling a little lighter, a little more at ease, a little more relaxed. But whatever you're feeling, just welcome it. Let it be here. And then could you let it go? Just could you? Would you? When? Okay. Now, if you were doing this on your own, you would keep repeating these questions to yourself until you felt completely relieved of whatever emotional content you had on that particular issue. So let's do a group process together. Allow yourself to focus inside, and you can do this with eyes open or eyes closed, however you prefer. And could you start out by simply allowing yourself to be? And be. And be. And could you allow yourself to welcome whatever is being heard in this moment? The sound of my voice, the sound of the echo in the room, the sound of the air conditioning, the sound of the noises in your own mind, your breathing, the cough. And also the silence that surrounds and interpenetrates every sound. The silence without which no sound could be perceived. And then could you also welcome whatever is being seen in this moment? Now, even if you have your eyes closed, at the very least, you're probably seeing patterns on the inside of your eyelids. Or you may be having mental pictures. And if you have your eyes open, you see this room. But whatever you're seeing in this moment, could you simply allow it to be? Welcome it. Let it be here. And could you also welcome the emptiness or the space that allows for seeing? And then could you allow your sense of welcoming to expand even further? To include whatever sensations you're experiencing in this moment. The sensations of your feet against the floor. Your back and thighs against the chair. Your hands, whatever they're touching. The clothing touching your skin. The rise and fall of your chest and your stomach as you breathe. And also whatever emotions you're experiencing in the moment. Emotions are really just a combination of sensations that you've made up a meaning about, a story about. So could you welcome those as well? And then could you also welcome the emptiness, the space, the isness that allows all sensations to be? And then could you allow yourself to remember the memory called your life? Everything that's happened up until this moment. And check to see if there's anything that's happened up until this moment that you wish were different, that you're wanting to change. And just for now, could you let go of wanting to change it? Would you? When? And focus on that same thing or something else about the memory you call life that you'd like to change, that you want to edit, correct, maybe even pretend it never happened. And just for now, could you let go of wanting to change it? Would you? When? And focus on that same thing or something else from the memory called your life that you wish were different, that you're wanting to change. And just for now, could you let go of wanting to change it? Would you? When? Now allow yourself as best you can to picture your vision, what it is you're wanting to create in life. And do that with, it could be visual pictures, it could be sounds, using words, or it could be sensations, or a combination thereof. But as best you can, could you allow yourself to see it as though it is already done? And then first check to see if there's anything inside of you preventing you from seeing it clearly, from accepting it as a possibility. And if so, see if you'd like to change that. And could you let go of wanting to change that? Would you? When? And again, allow yourself as best you can to see yourself having, being, and doing everything your heart desires. And if there's anything inside of you that says, no, I can't have that, it's not real, it's not important, it's not meaningful, it's not special, or whatever consideration you may have about simply accepting it is now, could you simply welcome that feeling, that emotion? And then could you let it go? Just could you? Would you? When? And focus on that again. See if there's anything that's preventing you from simply accepting that you have your vision now. It is already created, at least in your mind. And if so, check to see if you'd like to change that. And if so, could you let go of wanting to change that? Would you? When? And again, as best you can, could you allow yourself to picture yourself having it all, accepting the abundance and the beauty and everything that this life has to offer? And could you welcome that picture as best you can? Sit back into it. And if you'd like, you can even surrender to the picture of the perfection that you are. and then knowing that it is now, that all is well and unfolding perfectly as it should for the manifestation of your dreams. Could you simply let go? And could you do that again, knowing that all is well and everything is unfolding exactly as it should be? Could you simply let go? And we're doing that one more time, accepting at least the possibility that all is well and everything is unfolding as it should be. Could you simply let go and rest as that which is already whole, already complete, and already perfect? And could you just rest? And while allowing yourself to remain at rest, gradually allow awareness to expand to include what you believe is external to you. Knowing that in order to do that, there's no need to reject the internal. They're already one. And then as your awareness expands to embrace the external, let it also, whenever it's ready to, if it hasn't already, open those eyelids.
So there's an example of a couple of Sedona method releases. We don't have the time to do that. I mean, they're quick releases, and they're simple. If you like it and it appeals to you, you can get the Sedona method course from them or us. And there are other methods as well, but that's just one example and one illustration of getting rid of stored feelings. So what was your experience doing that? Nobody had any experiences. It's all gone. Kurt?
Certainly there's a lot of peace, there's a lot of just a deeper understanding of how attachments are formed and held, and the interesting thing that keeps coming up for me is that when you release and continue to release, then what's there? You know, like I had myself to the point where it was like, okay, yes, I can let go of that, I can let go of that now, and then there's less there. But then it became this almost, not fear, but this questioning of when everything is released, what's left?
You can actually release to get higher. So I've been to a Sedona method retreat where we did that. So you got to a place where it was like peace or something, and then you release peace, and it was nothingness or something like that, and maybe joy came in when you released the nothingness. But you kept getting higher.
Yeah.
So all you're doing is emptying yourself out. So you're not a manufacturer of reality. Maybe one day you turn the light and you can answer the question, what happens next?